Let me ask you something straight up. Have you ever wondered whether masturbation is actually dangerous for you? I mean, we all hear so many different things. Some say it's perfectly normal. Some say it can harm your body. Others even claim it ruins your energy, your focus, your confidence. But what's the real truth? Today, we're going to break it down, step by step, in a way you've probably never heard before. So if you've ever felt guilty, confused, or just plain curious about this topic, stay with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to see it in a whole new light. First things first, masturbation is something almost everyone experiences at some point. It's one of those topics people don't usually talk about openly because of shame, culture, or just discomfort. But here's the thing, whether you're a man or a woman, young or older, your body naturally has sexual urges. That's biology. The question is not whether the urge is wrong. The question is, does acting on it through masturbation actually hurt you in the long run? Some people will tell you that masturbation can cause physical weakness, hair loss, even memory problems. Others swear it makes you tired, lazy, and less motivated. And then on the flip side, you'll hear medical professionals saying it's totally harmless, even healthy, because it relieves stress and helps you sleep. So who's telling the truth here? Let's dig deeper. Physically, masturbation on its own doesn't damage your organs. You're not going to lose your eyesight. You're not going to suddenly develop some disease just because of it. But, and this is a big but, the problem begins when it turns into a habit, an addiction. When you feel like you can't control yourself, when you're doing it every day or multiple times a day, that's when it starts to affect your body in subtle but real ways. Think about it like junk food. Eating a burger once in a while won't kill you, but if you live on burgers every single day, your health will pay the price. Over-masturbation can lead to fatigue, lower energy levels, and even reduced sexual sensitivity. Why? Because your brain releases dopamine and other feel-good chemicals every time you do it. That quick high trains your brain to keep chasing the same reward over and over time, your receptors become less sensitive. It's like when someone drinks coffee all the time. The first cup used to give them a big boost, but now they need 3 just to feel awake. The same thing happens with your brain's reward system. That's where the danger really lies. And it doesn't just stop at your physical health. Let's talk about the mental and emotional side. If you're constantly turning to masturbation as a way to deal with stress, boredom, or loneliness, you're wiring your brain to escape instead of facing life's challenges. That habit can lower your motivation, your confidence, and even create feelings of guilt and shame. Some people fall into a cycle. They feel lonely, they masturbate, then they feel guilty, then they promise to stop, then the urge comes back stronger. That's a mental trap, and it can seriously affect your self-esteem. Now here's where things get really interesting. Studies show that when people cut down or stop excessive masturbation, they often report higher energy, better focus, and even more confidence in social situations. Why? Because their brain is no longer drained by that constant dopamine roller coaster. They start to feel more in control of themselves, and that self-control carries over into other areas of life, work, fitness, relationships. And I know what some of you might be thinking, but wait, isn't masturbation supposed to be healthy? Doesn't it help with stress and relaxation? And yes, in moderation it can. If someone does it occasionally without guilt, without it interfering in their daily life, it's generally considered safe. But the key word here is moderation. The danger comes when it becomes excessive, compulsive, or tied to things like pornography. Because porn changes the game completely. Porn can rewire your brain, changing what you find arousing, and can even make real life intimacy less satisfying. That's why so many people report problems like erectile dysfunction or low sexual desire after years of heavy porn and masturbation use. Is masturbation dangerous? The honest answer is, it depends on how often, why you're doing it, and how it affects your mind and body. If you're using it occasionally, and it's not interfering with your relationships, your energy, or your goals, then it's not inherently harmful. But if it's daily, multiple times a day, connected with constant porn use, or leaving you drained and guilty, then yes, it can be very dangerous. Not because it's toxic in itself, but because of how it shapes your habits, your brain, and your life. Think about it this way. Every time you give in to the urge, you're reinforcing a pattern. If that pattern takes priority over real connection, real growth, or real productivity, then you're slowly programming yourself to live on autopilot. And nothing is more dangerous for your future than losing control over your own willpower. Here's what I want you to take away from this conversation. Masturbation is not your enemy, but lack of balance is. Your body and your brain thrive on discipline, control, and meaningful connection. If you feel like you're losing energy, focus, or motivation because of this habit, that's your signal to step back, reassess, and maybe reset. Try challenges like no, FAP. Focus your energy on exercise, build deeper relationships, pick up hobbies, channel that sexual energy into self-improvement. You'll be surprised at how much power and clarity you gain when you stop letting this habit control you. At the end of the day, it's your life, your body, your choice, but you deserve to live at your highest potential with energy, focus, and confidence. Don't let something as small as an unchecked habit rob you of that. Use your energy for growth, not escape. When we talk about masturbation, most people automatically think about whether the act itself is dangerous or not. They think in black and white terms. It's either safe or unsafe, good or bad. But the reality is much more nuanced than that. Masturbation itself isn't some poison that instantly damages your body. The true danger lies in something deeper, something most people don't talk about, and that's self-control. Or more specifically, the loss of self-control. Because when you lose control over your urges, your desires, and your actions, it doesn't just stay limited to your private life. It spills over into your energy, your habits, your focus, your relationships, your productivity, and essentially every part of who I think about it like this. Your brain is constantly making decisions, big and small, throughout the day. Do I wake up early or hit snooze? Do I go to the gym or stay in bed? Do I focus on work or scroll through my phone? Every choice you make builds your character, and every time you give in to an impulse, you're training your brain that instant gratification is more important than long-term growth. Masturbation, when it becomes a habit you can't control, is one of the clearest examples of this instant gratification trap. It's easy, it's accessible, it feels good, and it requires no effort, no courage, no investment. But that's exactly why it can be dangerous, because it teaches your brain to settle for the quick hit instead of pursuing the harder, but far more rewarding path. Now let's break down what loss of self-control in this area actually does to you. Physically, when you give in to excessive masturbation, especially when it's tied to pornography, your brain releases a flood of dopamine. Dopamine is the chemical that signals pleasure and reward. Over time, your brain gets used to those high levels of dopamine, and it starts demanding more and more to feel the same effect. This is called desensitization. That means ordinary pleasures, eating a meal, going for a walk, talking to a friend, don't feel as enjoyable anymore. The baseline of your happiness gets lowered, and your brain only lights up when you indulge in that compulsive behavior again. This is exactly how addiction works, whether it's drugs, gambling, or pornography. So the act itself might not be killing you, but the loss of control is rewiring your brain in a way that steals joy from the rest of your life emotionally. This lack of control can create feelings of guilt and shame. You tell yourself, I'll stop tomorrow, but tomorrow comes and you find yourself doing it again. That cycle eats away at your self-respect. It makes you feel weaker, like you're not the master of your own decisions. Over time, that sense of guilt can morph into anxiety or even depression, because deep down, humans thrive when they feel in control of themselves. When you know that your mind and body obey your will, you feel powerful. But when you realize that your urges are controlling you, you feel small. That emotional weight can bleed into your relationships, your work, and your general outlook on life socially. The consequences can be subtle but very real. If you're spending more and more time isolated, escaping into your own private habit, instead of connecting with real people, you start to lose the confidence to interact naturally. Many people who struggle with compulsive masturbation or porn report feeling awkward, less confident, and even anxious in social or intimate situations. Why? Because their brain has been conditioned to seek pleasure in isolation, behind a screen, without the vulnerability and complexity of real human connection. So when they face actual people, it feels intimidating. This again isn't because masturbation itself is poisonous, but because the lack of self-control has shifted how they relate to others. Let's also look at the impact on productivity and discipline. Every great achievement in life, whether it's building a career, mastering a skill, or achieving a fitness goal, requires delayed gratification. It requires resisting the temptation of comfort today for the sake of something greater tomorrow. When you're trapped in a cycle of compulsive masturbation, you're doing the opposite. You're rewarding yourself instantly with zero effort, and that weakens your ability to delay gratification in other areas. Suddenly, studying feels harder, working on a long-term project feels boring, going to the gym feels like a chore. Your brain is addicted to the easy path, and that mindset holds you back from becoming your best self. Again, the danger isn't the act. It's the erosion of discipline that comes with not being able to say no to yourself. And this lack of discipline doesn't stop at masturbation. Once your brain gets used to giving in to one urge, it becomes easier to give in to others. Maybe you start overeating junk food, binge, watching shows late at night, scrolling endlessly on your phone, procrastinating on work. It all comes from the same root, the inability to control impulses. That's why this discussion is so important, because we're not just talking about a private habit. We're talking about the very skill that determines success in life. Self-control is like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. But the more you neglect it, the weaker it becomes. And when it's weak, every aspect of your life suffers. Now let's talk about relationships. A lack of self-control in this area can deeply affect intimacy with a partner. When someone becomes reliant on masturbation, especially with pornography, they may find it harder to feel the same excitement with their real partner. Some even experience erectile dysfunction or lack of desire, not because their body is broken, but because their brain has been conditioned to respond to artificial stimuli instead of genuine human connection. This creates frustration, distance, and conflict in relationships. Partners may feel neglected or unwanted, and the individual may feel ashamed and powerless. The root cause, again, is not masturbation itself, but the loss of balance, the loss of control over how, and when it happens, another area this touches is confidence. Confidence is built onto main pillars: self, respect, and competence. Self-respect comes from knowing you can rely on yourself to do what you say you'll do. Competence comes from proving to yourself that you can take on challenges and succeed. When you lack self-control, both pillars crumble. You don't respect yourself because you keep breaking your own promises. And you don't build competence because you're not challenging yourself. You're retreating into comfort. The result is a shaky, insecure version of yourself, one that struggles to take risks, chase dreams, or stand tall in the face of adversity. This is why people who overcome compulsive habits often report a massive boost in confidence, because they've finally regained control of themselves. Now, some people might argue, but isn't masturbation natural? Isn't it just part of being human? And yes, it is natural. The human body has sexual energy, and it's not wrong to acknowledge that. But here's the point, just because something is natural doesn't mean it should control you. Anger is natural, but if you let it control you, you can ruin your relationships. Hunger is natural, but if you overeat, you damage your health. Fear is natural, but if you let it dictate your choices, you never grow. The same goes for sexual urges. Natural, yes, but dangerous when uncontrolled. The difference between a powerful person and a weak person is not the absence of urges. It's the ability to master them instead of being mastered by them. Let's also look at the idea of energy. Many people who quit or reduce compulsive masturbation report feeling a surge of energy and motivation. This isn't just in their heads. Sexual energy is one of the most powerful drives a human being has. When it's constantly released in an uncontrolled way, that energy is scattered, wasted. But when it's controlled, it can be redirected into creativity, ambition, and passion. History is full of examples of thinkers, athletes, and leaders who practiced self-control in this area and claimed it gave them greater focus and vitality. Whether or not you believe in concepts like sexual transmutation, one thing is clear: when you master your urges, you free up energy and willpower to invest in areas of life that truly matter. And here's something important. Self-control doesn't mean total abstinence for everyone. It doesn't mean you have to live like a monk or deny every urge. It means being in charge. It means that if you decide to abstain, you can. If you decide to indulge, it's on your terms, without guilt, without compulsion. That's the difference between freedom and slavery. A person who can't stop, even when they want to, is not free. They're chained to their habit. And freedom is the foundation of health, happiness, and success. So when we say the real danger is losing self-control, we're talking about losing your freedom, your independence, your ability to choose. Imagine two versions of yourself. In one version, you give in to every impulse. You stay up late, you skip workouts, you procrastinate, you overindulge, and yes, you masturbate excessively whenever the urge hits. In the moment, it feels fine. But over time, you become tired, unmotivated, insecure, maybe even resentful of yourself. In the other version, you master self-control. You don't let urges dictate your actions. You use your energy for fitness, learning, building, connecting. You respect yourself because you know you're in charge. You feel confident, productive, alive. Those two versions of yourself are built on the same foundation, what you choose to do in moments of temptation. That's why this conversation matters so much, because your future self depends on the level of control you practice today. So when we say the real danger is not masturbation itself, but losing self-control, what we're really talking about is the difference between living life as the captain of your ship or as a passenger, just going wherever the wind takes you. Self-control is what allows you to steer toward your goals instead of drifting aimlessly. Without it, even the smallest habits can accumulate into massive consequences. With it, even the hardest challenges become manageable because you know you can trust yourself to do what needs to be done. A lot of people immediately swing to one extreme or the other. Some will tell you it's absolutely harmful, that it drains your body, weakens your mind, destroys your energy. Others will insist it's completely harmless, even healthy, something you should do whenever you feel like it without a second thought. But the truth, as with most things in life, usually lies somewhere in the middle. The fact is that masturbation in moderation, without guilt, is generally safe and can actually provide some benefits, especially when it comes to stress relief. The problem doesn't come from the act itself, but from how often, why, and with what mindset you're doing it. Once we start looking at it through that lens, things become much clearer. Think about it. Our bodies are wired with natural urges. Sexual desire is not something you can just erase. It's built into the biology of every human being. For centuries, cultures have treated this subject as taboo, something not to be spoken about, and that has created a lot of unnecessary fear and shame around it. But biologically, masturbation is simply a way for the body to release built-up sexual tension. When done occasionally, it doesn't damage organs. It doesn't ruin your health, and it certainly doesn't shorten your lifespan. In fact, for many people, it can be a safe outlet, especially if they don't currently have a partner. The real challenge is balance, because too much of anything, even something natural, tips the scale toward harm instead of benefit. Now let's explore what moderation actually means. Moderation doesn't mean never, and it doesn't mean all the time. It means occasional when you feel the urge, but not to the point where it becomes a daily crutch or a compulsive behavior. Everyone's threshold for moderation looks slightly different. For some people, once or twice a week might feel balanced. For others, less frequent might be better. What matters most is whether it interferes with your daily life. If it doesn't make you feel drained, if it doesn't replace real connection with people, if it doesn't stop you from working on your goals, then it's within a moderate range. And when it stays moderate, masturbation has some interesting benefits that often get overlooked. One of the most common benefits people experience is stress relief. After all, sexual release leads to a surge of endorphins and oxytocin, two powerful chemicals that reduce stress and create feelings of relaxation. That's why many people report that they sleep better after releasing tension in this way. For someone who's been carrying stress from work, studies, or personal struggles, occasional masturbation can act as a quick reset button for the nervous system. It calms the mind, lowers tension in the body, and allows for better rest. Stress is a major contributor to countless health problems: heart disease, high blood pressure, insomnia, even weakened immunity. So anything that helps reduce stress in a healthy, non-destructive way has some value. Masturbation, in moderation, can be one of those tools. It's also worth pointing out that guilt plays a huge role in how masturbation affects you. Many people feel an overwhelming sense of shame after doing it, not because their body has been harmed, but because their mind has been conditioned to see it as dirty or wrong. That guilt creates more stress than the act itself. It leads to a negative spiral where you feel bad about yourself, promise not to do it again, and then end up repeating the cycle. That guilt is far more harmful to your mental health than the act of masturbation in moderation could ever be. When you approach it with a balanced mindset, understanding that your body is simply releasing built-up tension and that you're in control of how often you allow it, the guilt disappears. Without guilt, the psychological burden is lifted and you can maintain a healthier relationship with your own body. Moderation also protects you from the downsides of overindulgence. Over-masturbation can drain your energy, lower your motivation, and dull your sensitivity, but occasional masturbation doesn't carry those risks in the same way. In fact, Some research suggests that periodic release can even support prostate health in men by flushing out old fluids from the system. For women, it can help relieve menstrual cramps or pelvic tension. Again, the key is that these benefits show up when masturbation is part of a balanced lifestyle, not when it becomes an escape from real life problems. That's the fine line we need to understand. Too little and you might feel unnecessarily repressed. Too much and you risk losing energy and control. But somewhere in the middle is a space where the act can be safe, natural, and even beneficial. There's also the mental clarity aspect. When sexual tension builds up in the body, it can sometimes become distracting, pulling your focus away from work, studies, or personal goals. In such cases, releasing that tension in moderation can actually free up mental energy, allowing you to concentrate better. People often underestimate how powerful sexual energy is. It can be distracting, overwhelming, and hard to ignore. By giving yourself an occasional outlet, you prevent it from interfering with your day-to-day productivity. Of course, the key is that you don't use masturbation as your primary way of coping with boredom or stress. It should be a release when necessary, not your only strategy for managing emotions. Now, let's talk about the body's chemical response. During masturbation and orgasm, your body releases dopamine, oxytocin, and prolactin. Dopamine gives you that pleasure and reward feeling. Oxytocin, often called the bonding hormone, helps calm anxiety and creates a sense of well-being. Prolactin is linked to relaxation and satisfaction, which is why you often feel a wave of calm after release. In moderation, this chemical cocktail can actually be good for your system. It provides natural stress relief, lowers blood pressure, and helps you relax. Problems arise only when the brain gets overloaded with dopamine repeatedly, which dulls the receptors and makes you chase bigger and bigger highs, often through pornography. That's why moderation is the balance point. Enough to gain the calming benefits, not so much that you end up in a cycle of chasing the high every day. Moderation also means being intentional. Instead of acting on every urge immediately, you choose when and why. This gives you control. You're not a slave to your urges, you're in charge. That's an important distinction because the healthiest approach to masturbation is one where you decide, not your impulses. When you know you can go days without it, but you also allow yourself the option when you genuinely want to release tension. You maintain power over the habit. That's what separates moderation from compulsion. Compulsion is automatic and unconscious. Moderation is conscious and deliberate. It's also important to remember that masturbation doesn't have to be tied to porn. In fact, one of the safest ways to keep it moderate and healthy is to separate it from pornography altogether. Porn is what really rewires the brain and creates unrealistic expectations about sex. Without porn, masturbation becomes a much more natural process, simply a release of tension rather than a flood of artificial stimuli. This again ties back to moderation, limiting the sources of stimulation so that your brain isn't constantly overloaded. Without the exaggerated highs of porn, the act stays grounded, natural, and less likely to become addictive. Another aspect worth talking about is how moderation helps you stay in tune with your body. When you don't overdo it, you become more sensitive to your natural rhythms and cycles. You notice when your body feels tense, when it feels relaxed, and when you actually want release versus when you're just acting out of boredom. This kind of awareness helps you build a healthier relationship with yourself. Instead of feeling like your urges control you, you become more mindful, more aware, and more respectful of your body's needs. That awareness alone can reduce anxiety and guilt because you realize you're not acting mindlessly. You're making choices based on what truly feels balanced. There's also a big cultural piece here. For a long time, Masturbation has been portrayed as shameful, sinful, or destructive in many societies. This creates a stigma that makes people hide it, deny it, or lie about it. But hiding something only makes it more powerful in your mind. When you acknowledge that it's a natural act and that moderation keeps it safe, the secrecy loses its grip. You stop viewing it as a dark secret and start seeing it as one of many natural aspects of human life, something you can choose to engage with or not. That shift in mindset reduces guilt and lets you move forward with greater confidence in your own choices. Now, think about how this plays out in practical terms. Imagine you're someone who uses masturbation occasionally when you're stressed, or when you haven't had intimacy in a while, but it doesn't interfere with your work, your relationships, or your fitness goals. You go about your daily life, you stay productive, you stay connected with people, and masturbation remains just a small footnote in the bigger picture. That's moderation. Contrast that with someone who does it multiple times a day, can't focus on work, avoids socializing, feels drained, and ends up isolated. That's compulsion. The difference isn't the act itself. The difference is frequency, mindset, and control. One person is balanced, the other is trapped. And this is why moderation is so important. It allows you to enjoy the benefits without falling into the dangers. It's also worth addressing the myth that masturbation in moderation ruins your masculinity, femininity, or vitality. There are many exaggerated claims out there that even occasional masturbation will sap your energy, weaken your muscles, or cause long-term harm. The truth is, occasional release doesn't have that effect. Your body is constantly producing and replenishing sexual fluids, and using them occasionally is not going to break the system. What weakens vitality is not the occasional act, but the constant draining that comes with excess. In fact, many people report feeling lighter, calmer, and more relaxed after occasional masturbation because it releases tension they were holding in both their body and mind. It's the balance that matters. Another point to consider is that masturbation in moderation can help people who are single maintain a healthier mindset around sex. Instead of building up overwhelming pressure or frustration, occasional release can prevent tension from spilling into irritability or impulsive decisions. For couples, it can also sometimes help manage mismatched libidos, where one partner has higher sexual desire than the other. Again, the key word here is sometimes and in moderation. It should never replace real intimacy or connection, but in some cases, it can serve as a pressure release that actually supports harmony rather than disrupting it. We also need to think about the role of guilt again, because guilt can be more toxic than the act itself. If you're doing it moderately but beating yourself up every time, you're canceling out the benefits. Your body might feel relaxed, but your mind will be flooded with self-criticism. That negative self-talk creates more stress, more shame, and more distance between you and your goals. On the other hand, if you approach it with a healthy mindset, understanding that moderation is safe and natural, you experience the calm without the burden. That's why education on this subject is so important. People need to know that balance is possible, that they don't have to live in extremes of indulgence or total suppression. When we say masturbation in moderation without guilt is generally safe and can help with stress relief, what we're really talking about is balance, control, and mindset. It's about not letting urges dictate your life, but also not demonizing a natural function of the body. It's about using it as one tool for relaxation and release, but not as a crutch or an escape. It's about respecting yourself enough to stay in control while also giving yourself permission to be human. The conversation usually focuses on whether it's healthy or harmful, whether you should stop it completely or whether it doesn't matter at all. But one of the most overlooked truths is that when someone cuts down, when they simply reduce how often they do it, they often experience something unexpected, an increase in energy, better focus, and a rise in confidence. And the reason is not mysterious. It's tied to the way our bodies and brains are wired. Because sexual energy is powerful energy, and when it's not constantly being drained, it becomes available to fuel other areas of life. Cutting down is not about living in denial or repressing yourself. It's about balance. And when you take back control, you feel the difference in ways you might not even expect. Let's start with energy, because that's the first change most people notice when they cut back. Masturbation is physically draining because it involves a release of energy, and when it happens too frequently, the body doesn't always get enough time to recover. But when you reduce the frequency, your energy feels different, more stable, more consistent. Instead of feeling lethargic, heavy, or tired after frequent release, you start to feel light alert and full of vitality. It's almost like you've reclaimed fuel that was leaking out unnoticed. This is why many people who experiment with cutting down, even if they don't quit completely, report feeling stronger at the gym, more motivated at work, and more awake during the day. The body is no longer being taxed constantly, so it redirects that energy into physical strength and stamina, but it's not just physical energy. There's also a mental and emotional energy that gets restored. When you cut down, your brain stops being constantly overstimulated by dopamine highs and lows. Instead of being stuck in a cycle of release, guilt, craving, and fatigue, your brain stabilizes. The constant fog lifts. That mental fog is something a lot of people don't realize is connected to masturbation until they take a break and suddenly notice clarity returning. They can think sharper, make decisions faster, and stay alert longer. That's what focus feels like when the brain is not clouded by the cycle of compulsive reward seeking. Cutting down gives your mind the chance to reset and operate with more balance. Focus is one of the most underrated benefits of cutting back. When you're constantly chasing urges, you're distracted. Even if you don't act on them, the thought lingers in the back of your mind, pulling your attention away from what you should be doing. But when you cut down, the urges are less frequent and less controlling, and suddenly your concentration becomes deeper. Whether it's studying, working on a project, reading a book, or practicing a skill, you find yourself able to sink into the task for longer without interruptions. This focus is powerful because it's the foundation of success in any area of life. Every great achievement comes from sustained attention, and cutting back from compulsive habits allows you to reclaim that attention. Confidence is another huge shift that happens when people cut down. Confidence doesn't just come from how you look or how others see you, it comes from how you see yourself. When you cut down, you prove to yourself that you're in control of your urges. That alone builds self-respect. You're no longer stuck in the cycle of, I'll stop tomorrow, and then failing again. Each day that you manage to cut back is a day you strengthen your self-discipline, and that discipline turns into pride. You start holding your head higher, speaking with more certainty, and carrying yourself with more assurance. Not because anything magical has happened, but because you know you're not a slave to your impulses anymore. That self-respect is what breeds confidence, and it shows in how you interact with others. There's also something subtle but important here. When you cut down, your social confidence improves too. Masturbation, especially when linked with pornography, isolates you. It keeps you locked away in a private loop that reduces your desire to interact with the real world. But when you cut back, that isolation breaks. Your desire to connect with real people grows stronger because your brain isn't being satisfied with artificial stimulation, all the time. That renewed social energy makes you more comfortable in conversations, more open to meeting people, and more confident in relationships. It's like a part of you that was closed off suddenly wakes up again. This is why so many people report that when they cut down, they feel more attractive, not because their appearance has changed, but because their energy and confidence radiate differently. Cutting down also affects discipline across the board. If you can control something as powerful as a sexual urge, then controlling smaller temptations like junk food, procrastination, or staying up late suddenly becomes easier. It's like training a muscle. When you practice self-control in one area, that strength carries over into other parts of your life. And with discipline comes structure, progress, and growth. You start finishing tasks you used to avoid. You stick to routines more easily. You stop wasting as much time on distractions. The act of cutting down doesn't just free energy, it trains your willpower, and that willpower becomes the backbone of your success in multiple areas. Let's also look at the way cutting down changes your relationship with pleasure. When you're constantly indulging, your brain becomes desensitized, and normal pleasures, like eating a good meal, having a conversation, or enjoying a sunset, don't feel as rewarding anymore. But when you cut down, sensitivity returns. Your brain starts appreciating smaller joys again, because it's not being flooded with dopamine all the time. This makes life richer, more vibrant, more satisfying. Suddenly, the things you used to overlook feel meaningful again. That's one of the underrated benefits of cutting back, the return of simple pleasures. On a biological level, reducing the frequency of masturbation can also support hormone balance. While occasional release is natural, constant release can lower testosterone temporarily in men, and that affects energy, drive, and mood. By cutting back, testosterone levels stabilize, which translates into more vitality, sharper focus, and greater motivation. For women, reducing compulsive habits can also lead to a more balanced emotional state and a healthier connection with their own bodies. Hormones play a huge role in how we feel and how we perform, and cutting back helps keep them steady instead of constantly fluctuating. Another powerful shift that comes with cutting down is a change in how you handle stress. Many people use masturbation as their main coping mechanism when they're stressed, bored, or anxious. But when you cut down, you're forced to find new, healthier outlets. Exercise, meditation, journaling, connecting with friends, working on creative projects. These outlets not only relieve stress, but actually build resilience. Instead of escaping from discomfort, you learn to face it and manage it. Over time, this makes you stronger and more adaptable. Cutting down isn't just about reducing a habit. It's about creating space for better habits to take root. And those habits give you long-lasting tools for handling life's challenges. Now let's consider the spiritual or deeper side of this. Many traditions around the world, from ancient philosophies to modern self-improvement movements, talk about the power of conserving sexual energy, whether or not you believe in spiritual concepts. There's truth in the idea that sexual energy is one of the strongest forces we have. When it's not constantly drained, it transforms into drive, ambition, creativity, and presence. Cutting down allows that energy to build up, and people often notice that they feel more passionate about life, more motivated to pursue goals, and more magnetic around others. That magnetism is just another word for confidence, the kind of natural charisma that draws people in because you're radiating controlled, focused energy instead of scattered, drained energy. Cutting down also teaches patience, and patience is one of the keys to success in any field. When you resist the urge to indulge immediately, you're training yourself to delay gratification. And delayed gratification is what allows you to work for months or years towards something meaningful instead of giving up for quick rewards. Every time you cut down, you're not just avoiding a habit. You're building the mental toughness to chase bigger dreams. That toughness becomes part of your identity. You start seeing yourself as someone who has control, someone who can handle challenges, and that identity becomes self-reinforcing. Confidence grows not because you're perfect, but because you're proving to yourself that you can improve. Another benefit of cutting down is emotional stability. When you're overindulging, you often ride a roller coaster of highs and lows. You feel good for a moment, then drained, then guilty, then restless, and the cycle repeats. Cutting down evens out that cycle. Your mood stabilizes, your emotions feel less chaotic, and you're more consistent in how you show up day to day. That stability feeds into relationships, work, and personal growth. People around you notice the difference when you're steady instead of scattered, when you're calm instead of restless, when you're confident instead of insecure. It all starts with reducing a habit that was pulling your energy in too many directions. What's also fascinating is how cutting down changes your perception of yourself. When you're trapped in a cycle of overindulgence, you often see yourself as weak, lazy, or out of control. That self-image holds you back because you start believing it's who you are. But when you cut back even a little, you start to see yourself differently. You realize you can change, you can grow, you can resist urges. That new self-image is empowering. It motivates you to keep going, to build momentum, to improve in other areas. It's like a domino effect. One small change leads to another, and before you know it, you're living a completely different version of yourself. Cutting down also restores your sense of time. Overindulgence often eats up hours that could be spent doing something meaningful. But when you reduce the habit, you free up time to invest in yourself. That extra hour could become a workout, a skill learned, a book read, or a business idea pursued. Over weeks and months, those reclaimed hours add up to massive growth. Cutting down isn't just about stopping something negative, it's about making room for positive change. And when you use that time wisely, you feel more accomplished, more proud, and more confident in your direction. Ultimately, cutting down brings balance. You're not denying your nature, you're mastering it. You're not letting urges control you, but you're also not living in fear of them. That balance creates harmony in your life. Your energy stabilizes, your focus sharpens, your confidence rises, and your discipline strengthens. And it all starts with one simple choice: to reduce, to take control, to stop letting impulses dictate your actions,